strongly not to go for the Scharnhorst. And that night, as it was getting dark, or as dark as it gets at that time of year, we surfaced among some small islands about 4 miles from the target. We stopped on the surface among the rocks, charging the batteries, and odd members of the crew came up from time to time to look around and take a breath of fresh air. And you could hear the broadcasts from the oilers and tankers and supply ships down in the anchorage. In fact, it was really an almost completely peaceful setting. It was hard to believe that our target was only a matter of 4 miles away. The first obstacle were the anti-submarine nets across the entrance to Carfield, about 2 miles from the target. Normally right the way across, but they had a gate at the south end, which was often open to let ships in. And in the event, they were open with a minesweeper going through, and I took the opportunity of going in behind.
Meanwhile, X6, under the command of Lieutenant Donald Cameron, sailed up the fjord underwater as far as the anti-torpedo nets surrounding the Tirpitz. They hid in waiting until the nets were opened for a service craft. The X6 crept in and followed it through. A flooded periscope hindered the X-craft's view. The forward ballast tank was also leaking air, making the X-craft even more difficult to control. Suddenly, the X6 ran aground on some rocks. After frantic efforts, it wrenched itself free, but bobbed to the surface. Guards on the Tirpitz saw this happen, but thought the black shape was a porpoise or a seal. The X6 dove again, but with the flooded periscope, it was blind. Cameron guided the craft by dead reckoning, but upon surfacing, the crew of the Tirpitz opened fire. John Lorimer of the X6 recalls the moment.
By this time, it was quite obvious that we had been spotted because the Germans were machine gunning us and throwing hand grenades. Cameron decided that with so much machinery defunct, the only thing to do was to lay our charges and scuttle and get out best we could. So we reversed into the Tirpitz, which we hit with a loud clang, and at long last we released our side charges.
After the X6 crew laid its charges at the bow of the Tirpitz, they abandoned ship. By now, the Tirpitz had gone to action stations, and the crew of the X6 were soon picked up by a German motor launch.
As we came up the gangway, I turned to Donald Cameron and said, "Do you think we should salute the quarterdeck in good naval tradition?" And he said yes, so we duly did. We then, all four were lined up on the quarterdeck and searched and our possessions removed, and he and I were taken away for interrogation.
Meanwhile, Lieutenant Place and X7 slipped unnoticed beneath the anti-torpedo nets.
So it was half ahead, 60 feet ordered, and in fact, we struck the Tirpitz a glancing blow as we slid underneath into the full shadow of the ship. I set the time fuses to 1 hour and released the first charge right under A and B turrets. Then 300 feet further astern underneath the ship and releasing the other charge under the after turrets. And then a quick turn back for the hole we came in by.
Derek Goddard of the X6 explained.
And I was left in a corridor with a guard, and I could hear chains clanking and thought, oh dear, they're going to move the ship before our charges go off.
Aware of the danger, the Germans tried desperately to move the Tirpitz at her moorings, but they were too late. The charges exploded.
The foam extinguishers or foam main started to pour force foam onto my German captor, who didn't like this very much. He grabbed me by the neck, murmuring of swinehund and one thing and another.
I was thrown off my chair, all the lights went out. Shortly after, I was grabbed by the scruff of the neck and taken up onto the quarterdeck again, where there were a lot of very hostile Germans running in a state of panic. We then were lined up, the four of us, feeling, myself and I think the others, a tremendous sense of frustration that the ship was still afloat.
At the time of the explosion, X-7 was entangled in the anti-torpedo nets. The shock blew it free, but it sank soon afterwards. Only 2 of her crew survived. The third midget submarine, X-5, was never seen again. Britain's highest military award, the Victoria Cross, was awarded to the successful commanders of X-6 and 7, Lieutenants Cameron and Place, who spent the rest of the war as German prisoners. The Tirpitz was severely damaged by the raiders of Operation Source. The raid gave a huge boost to British morale. It took the Germans over 6 months to repair the Tirpitz and get it operational again. By then, the Royal Navy had regrouped for another battle with the Tirpitz. The Kriegsmarine decided that it was too dangerous to tow the damaged Tirpitz to Germany for repairs and dry dock. They had to patch it up in Norway. Throughout the winter of 1943 and 44, hundreds of workers and crew labored under freezing conditions to repair the extensive damage. By mid-March, the Tirpitz was ready for sea trials, and by month's end, it was declared operational once more. The fjord watchers noted every move and reported to the British Admiralty. When the Royal Navy's home fleet set sail from Scapa Flow on March 30th, 1944, morale was high. At the beginning of the year, it had sunk the battle cruiser Scharnhorst off the North Cape of Norway while it was attempting to intercept a convoy. It was a formidable force of some 25 warships, including battleships, aircraft carriers, cruisers, and destroyers. By dawn of April 3rd, the fleet was in position off Norway and ready to launch Operation Tungsten. In a complex air plan, they would attack the Tirpitz with 2 waves of Barracuda dive bombers armed with armor-piercing bombs. Corsair fighters escorted each wave, while Wildcats and Hellcats attacked the flak guns on board the Tirpitz and in the surrounding hills.
Braking leader to formation. Target straight ahead. Deploy for attack. Attack, attack, attack!
6 direct hits were made by the first wave and 8 by the second. With minor losses, the fleet air arm had inflicted heavy damage on the Tirpitz. "122 of its crewmen were killed and 316 were wounded.